the opportunity to speak to this Bristol University Climate Day of Action, and thank you for the action you've already taken. For example, divesting from fossil fuels as a university. I was asked to reflect on why it's so important to act on climate change, and I suspect you know this anyway, but the UN has told us that we have just 10 years to turn things round when it comes to the fight against climate change. This is the decisive decade which will determine the quality of life we have and the lives people lead for generations to come. So we can't afford not to focus on this issue with utmost concentration and utmost effort. Now, the scale of what we've got to do is daunting, but I would say, secondly, that there is real cause for hope. There's cause for hope because a decade ago when I was a climate change secretary, if people had said we'd have made the strides in terms of renewable energy, the reduction in its costs, the beginnings of a real explosion in its take-up all around the world, people wouldn't have believed it. The challenge is not one of the technical issues we face. There are technical issues, but the challenge is one of political imagination and political will. And that's why it's up to us as people to make sure that governments all around the world have the necessary focus on this issue. The other thing I would say to you is we of course have to take action to avoid disaster. But as we tackle the climate change challenge, we can't leave aside the injustices and inequalities of our world. We need to tackle both together. And there's something called the Green New Deal which speaks to this. As we tackle the climate change challenge, we can create great jobs of the future. And this is the moment when we should be investing as a country in all of the green jobs that need doing. The reason it's called the Green New Deal is it harks back to what Franklin Roosevelt did in the United States in the 1930s. We can create better jobs for people. We can cut air pollution, which is such a killer, a silent killer in our society. We can create clean green homes for people, which actually cut energy bills and actually tackle the terrible fuel poverty we face as a country. We can reorient our towns and our cities of being better for walking and cycling and public transport and all the things that we need. So the key thing about understanding this climate challenge, it's so fundamental, it's so big that what we've got to do, we've got to take people with us. And we take people with us by not ignoring the other injustices and inequalities we face in our country and indeed our world, but doing both together. And the kind of transition we have to make as a country will, I believe, enable us to do it. Indeed, it forces us to ask the questions about what kind of society we want to be, what kind of lives we want to lead. And this will be the big issue that dominates politics in the next 10 or 20 years as we make that transition. It must be a fair transition if we are to take people with us. The last thing I'll say to you is this. I think we all often wonder, when it comes to such a massive issue, can we make a difference? And the answer is yes. One of my favourite political speeches is by somebody called Robert Kennedy. And in that speech delivered in 1968, he talked about the way in which each person, when they stand up for an ideal, can create a ripple of hope. And as those ripples of hope form together, they can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and injustice. I believe that is as true today as it was then. Each of us can make a difference. You can make a difference at your university. You can make a difference with your local authority. You can make a difference putting pressure on national government. All of us together can make a difference putting pressure on governments of the world. And governments of the world will meet in Glasgow in November of this year. And that will be a decisive moment at COP26 as the world discusses whether it is going to rise to the challenge of climate change. So thank you for the interest that you have in this issue. Thank you for what you're doing at the university. All of us have a responsibility on this issue, a massive responsibility for ourselves and the world we inhabit and for future generations. And I believe that together we can both surmount the climate crisis we face and create a fairer, more just and more equal world.